Fellow Americans, good morning. Certain dates echo throughout history, including dates that instantly remind all who have lived through them where they were and what they were doing when our democracy came under assault.
Police hurried to America's House of Representatives in Washington following an attack by 3 Puerto Ricans, including Rafael Miranda, who fired on the senators in the chamber. Fellow gunman Andres Condero and the woman member of the trio Lolita Lebron are hustled away from the menacing crowd. Firing more than 20 rounds from their Luger automatics, the 3 fanatics seriously wounded 5 senators.
Dates that occupy not only a place on our calendars, but a place in our collective memory. December 7th, 1941, September 11th, 2001, and January 6th, 2021.
At 1 minute before 1 o'clock this morning, the switchboard at the Capitol received a phone call. A man's voice said a bomb would go off in the building in half an hour. At 1:30 in the morning, it did, in a small, unmarked restroom on the ground floor of the Senate side, next to a barber shop and near several small offices, including one committee hearing room. For a report on the first serious damage to the nation's foremost structure since the British burned it in 1814, here is ABC congressional correspondent Bob Clark.
We cannot let our future be decided by those bent on silencing our voices, overturning our votes, and peddling lies and misinformation by some radical faction that may be newly resurgent, but whose roots run old and deep.
People calling themselves members of the Weather Underground last night planted bombs in federal office buildings in Washington and Oakland, California. The group, apparently an offshoot of the old radical weathermen of the 1960s, claimed the bombs were set to protest American support for South Vietnam and Cambodia. We have reports, first from ABC's Ted Koppel at the State Department.
When I meet with young people, they often ask about the state of our democracy, about January 6th. And what I tell them is January 6th reflects the dual nature of democracy.
Burning cars and smashed windows. A small group of protesters dressed in black, their faces covered, armed with hammers and bricks.
Its fragility and its strength. You see, the strength of democracy is the rule of law. The strength of democracy is the principle that everyone should be treated equally, that elections should be free and fair, that corruption should be given no quarter.
Chaotic scene just blocks outside the secure area of the inauguration and parade route.
I personally have anti-establishment slants, but I don't think that this is anything that I want to be a part of.
This checkpoint is closed!
Before the swearing-in ceremony even began, protesters tried to block checkpoint entrances.
It's closed!
During President Trump's speech, several demonstrators were escorted out of the area. Several officers injured during the protest today, and more than 100 people arrested.
The strength of democracy is that it empowers the people. And the fragility of democracy is this, that if we are not vigilant, if we do not defend it, democracy simply will not stand.
We have been reporting on the shooting in Virginia all day long, and tonight law enforcement is warning lawmakers in Washington to be vigilant after a gunman targeted a congressional baseball practice. Again, the gunfire rang out in Alexandria, Virginia this morning. 5 people were hit, including House Majority Whip Steve Scalise of Louisiana. He was shot in the hip and is in critical condition following surgery. Police shot and killed the gunman, identified as James Hodgkinson of Illinois. Social media shows Hodgkinson spoke out against Republicans and volunteered for the Bernie Sanders presidential campaign.
It will falter and fail. The violent assault that took place here, the very fact of how close we came to an election overturned, that reflects the fragility of democracy. Yet, the resolve I saw in our elected leaders when I returned to the Senate chamber that night, their resolve not to yield, but to certify the election, their loyalty not to party or person, but to the Constitution of the United States.
Because 10 of the 29 electoral votes cast by Florida were cast by electors not lawfully certified.
I object to the votes from the state of Wisconsin, which should not be legally certified.
No debate.
Mr. President, I object to the certificate from the state of Georgia on the grounds that the electoral votes were not...
There's no debate.
And I object to the certificate from the state of North Carolina.
I object to the 15 votes from the state of North Carolina. I object.
I object to the certificate from the state of Alabama. The electors were not lawfully certified.
Do not wish to debate. I wish to ask, is there one United States senator who will join me in this letter of rejection?
There is no debate.
That reflects its strength. And so, of course, does the heroism of the Capitol Police, the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department, the National Guard, and other law enforcement officers who answered the call that day.
Go! Oh my God!
They got...
Including those who later succumbed to wounds, both visible and invisible.
More than 100 days after this silent tribute marking the death of U.S. Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick, D.C.'s chief medical examiner said Sicknick died of natural causes, suffering 2 strokes the night after the insurrection. The medical examiner first told the Washington Post Sicknick had no evidence of internal or external injuries, and there was no evidence the 42-year-old suffered allergic reactions to chemical irritants, like bear spray. 2 men are charged with assaulting Sicknick using chemical spray, but today's ruling all but ensures federal prosecutors won't be able to pursue homicide charges in Sicknick's death. The ME added the strokes alone ended Sicknick's life. His death wasn't hastened because of some other injury.
Our thoughts are with all of the families who have lost a loved one. You know, I wonder, how will January 6th come to be remembered in the years ahead? Will it be remembered as a moment that accelerated the unraveling of the oldest, greatest democracy in the world? Or a moment when we decided to secure and strengthen our democracy for generations to come? The American spirit is being tested. The answer to whether we will meet that test resides where it always has resided in our country, with you, the people. And the work ahead will not be easy. Here in this very building, a decision will be made about whether we uphold the right to vote and ensure free and fair elections.
So prompted Texas to initiate a full forensic audit of the presidential election, the progress of which was released New Year's Eve. According to the Secretary of State, phase 1 of that audit, which is focused on systems in 4 Texas counties, is complete. Auditors found a total of 509 possible duplicate votes cast in November 2020. Since that time, nearly 225,000 deceased voters were taken off the voting rolls in those counties, with investigations being launched into votes being made in the name of someone who had already died. The audit also found that nearly 12,000 non-U.S. citizens were registered to vote, and 3 of the 4 counties had discrepancies between ballots counted by hand during the audit and those that were counted electronically during the 2020 election. More information will be released after phase 2 of the audit is complete.
My fellow Americans, it is my honor to introduce a public servant with the character and fortitude to meet this moment, a leader whose life's work has been moving our nation toward that more perfect union, President Joe Biden.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
It makes a big difference how we end this war. And it makes a big difference to tell the American people the truth about what our options are in ending this war. If tomorrow the order goes out from I'm President of the United States, I issue an order, end the war today, begin to withdraw all American troops. It will take a year to get the American troops out. Do you hear me now? That's the truth. It will take a year to get them physically out. Now, if you leave all the equipment behind, you might be able to do it in 7 months. And you leave those billions of dollars of weapons behind, I promise they're going to be used against your grandchild and mine someday.